Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Licensing Subcommittee meeting on the 14th of October. May I remind everyone present that the meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording archived for future viewing. My name is Amy Rudman. I'm the Democratic and Scrutiny Services Officer supporting the hearing today. Could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking in order to avoid any background noise or feedback when other participants are speaking? And if a participant wishes to speak, can they please put their hand up using the raise hand function? Please could you ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. You can use the chat function today to highlight any technical issues or to grab the attention of myself or the chair of the committee who will shortly be elected. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when addressing the committee, please could they let myself or the chair know, and could they please try to increase their broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth in the first instance by turning off their webcam, their camera. So I'd like to start proceedings, please, as per the papers that have been circulated prior to the hearing today, by asking for nominations for the appointment of chair. Can I have nominations, please? Yes, Councillor Norman.
I nominate Councillor Michael Morgan, as chair.
Thank you. Could I have that seconded, please?
I'll second that.
Thank you very much. Therefore, Councillor Michael Morgan is duly elected as the chairman for the hearing this evening.
Is now joining.
Hello, Mr. Hill. It's Amy here from Democratic Services. Can you hear us okay?
I can, but your code on Teams doesn't work.
Right, so you have joined us on the telephone line.
Yeah, I'd like to join you on Teams, but it keeps telling me it can't find anything under the ID or code.
Right, okay, so did you click the joining link in the invitation that I sent you?
I did, and it sent me to, tried to join on the web, put in the passcode, it says join the meeting. As soon as I press that, it says the link is invalid.
Right, okay.
I don't
not
know
quite
if
sure.
anyone else is having that problem.
I'm afraid not, Mr. Hill, because all of the parties have joined us successfully via the video conference tool today. So if you'd like, we can briefly pause for a moment and I can give you a call over the telephone to try and help you do so.
No, stay on here, it's fine.
Okay, you can be heard obviously by all of the participants online today, and we can hear you nice and clearly.
That's great.
Just so you're aware, I'm the Democratic officer supporting the hearing today. I've opened the hearing and asked for nominations for the chair. Councillor Michael Morgan has duly been elected as the chair for proceedings today. So you haven't missed anything at all. We're just about to start business. So if I could ask Councillor Morgan if you could take over from agenda item 2, please, for declarations, and then we'll go to Richard Price as the legal officer to outline the procedure today. Thank you.
Here we are. Can you hear and see me?
Yes, Chair. Thank you.
Right. Well, Right, Amy's given a very helpful introduction. So are there any declarations before we start with the business of the meeting?
I have none.
Right, so if we pass over to Richard then. Hello, Richard.
You should have received the procedure as part of the report. Mr. Hill, have you seen the report that's been prepared for today?
Yeah, I've seen all that.
Okay, well, in short, what will happen is the report will be presented. Ms. Jones is here in respect of the application. She'll speak to the application together with South Wales Police. All parties will have the opportunity to ask questions of each other. And once everybody has said everything they need to say, the matter will be then dealt with in camera and a decision will be provided shortly. I anticipate, given that we've gone into Friday afternoon, and this is it is a complex application together with a number of representations, so I can't envisage that the reasons will be given out today, and they'll probably be given out sometime next week. That aside, there has been some additional information distributed by South Wales Police. Can I just check that everybody's received that?
Yeah.
Okay. Also, Mr. Hill, the representations which appear at Appendix D, they will be taken into account as part of the decision-making process. As part of your representations today, they are limited as set out in Appendix D, and you are able to expand upon those representations. You are, however, not able to introduce new matters which don't form the basis of your current representations. I hope that's clear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bear with me a second. Right, sorry, here we are. So so we're on item 3 on the agenda. The only item on the agenda is Cosmiston, yes. So the applicant in this matter is
Sarah Jones.
Sarah on behalf of Cosmiston Medieval Village, Lavana. So, and we've had a copy of the application itself. So could we hear from Sarah?
You actually have Yvonne Witchell, the licensing officer, on the line for you, Chair. So she'll introduce the application in the first place, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Over to yourself, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yvonne Witchell and I'm the team manager for licensing. I'm just going to run through a summary of the application and where we are at the moment before the application is fully presented to you. So as Richard has indicated, we have a report containing the application and an additional bundle of evidence that the South Wales Police will present to you when it's their turn to make their representations. So this is an application for the grant of a premises licence at Cosmiston Medieval Village, Lavana Road, Penarth, and as outlined in the report, you have an application form and a plan showing the proposed premises within Appendix A of your report. The application seeks authorisation for the following licensable activities: the sale by retail of alcohol for consumption on the premises and the provision of regulated entertainment. And the latter entertainment comprises permission to provide the performance of plays, showing of films, live and recorded music, performances of dance and anything else of a similar description as defined in the Licensing Act. There is an additional technical issue in respect of this application in that certain licensable activities have been deregulated since the Licensing Act came into force, and that means in certain circumstances one or more aspects of the application and licensable activities are exempt from the need to be authorised from a premises licence. We've included the full definition of what is exempt within the papers, and you'll receive legal advice on how those exemptions impact on this application in due course. Within your report, we've outlined that the applicant cannot rely on the deregulation exemptions if it proposes to hire out the premises to third parties who are not providing the entertainment on behalf of the local authority, and therefore this application is required to cover that eventuality. And one particular licensable activity, that is the showing of films on a commercial basis, requires an authorisation under a premises licence, irrespective of whether it's offered by a third party or it's by the premises licence holder itself. The application includes an operating schedule, which is set out at box M of the application form, and that sets out the steps the applicant proposes to take to promote the licensing objectives. As set out in the legislation, the application was advertised in accordance with the regulations, and the period for making those representations ended on the 19th of September of this year. On the 16th of September, representations were received from the South Wales Police, and a copy of the representations is attached to the report at Appendix C. There is a further bundle. I would just advise PC Mccarthy that we didn't duplicate the application form or plan when we sent round the additional bundle.
Yeah, thank you, Yvonne.
The Act also includes the provision for the application to be advertised, and in that respect, the authority received a number of representations, and these are attached at Appendix D. And in accordance with the statutory guidance, only those representations which relate to the 4 licensing objectives have been included in the summary of the objections. The rest of the report sets out the relevant sections of the Licensing Act 2003 which apply to this premises, and within 5.7 we set out the sections of the statutory guidance and the Vale of Glamorgan's licensing policy which apply to this particular application. So as none of the representations have been withdrawn, members, a full hearing of the application is required, and that's the report and application that we have before you.
Thank you, Yvonne. So do we have anybody then to speak for the application? Sarah, is that?
Yeah, hi.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi, can everyone hear me okay and things?
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, great. Shall I just start and give you the
Yeah,
overview,
please
Chair?
carry
Yeah.
on. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So just to give you a little bit of an intro, I'm Sarah Jones. I'm the Council's Events Officer. We're based within the Tourism and Events team, obviously at the Council, and the application is made for the Tourism and Events Department for the medieval village at Cosmiston. So just to give you a little bit of background, a bit about what we do and our experience. We have, since about 2006 now, a long time ago, had about 10 premise licences already running across the Vale, all various locations. They run in Barry Island, Barry Town Centre, Penarth Esplanade, Penarth Town Centre, Bromley Park, Porthkerry Park, Lantwick Major and Cowbridge, basically. We have a lot of experience of running large-scale events in all different locations, some challenging locations, town centres, not, nice fenced-off areas, open to the elements, open to roads, to people. And the type of events we hold and the type of duration as well is we run the Barry Island Food and Drink Festival, the Transport Festival, we're involved in the 10K run, Christmas events across the Vale, firework displays, the Tall Ship Festival, most recently Pride events, the Isle of Fire, and last year we trialled the Halloween Festival itself at Cosmiston Medieval Village. The reason we use premises licences is basically to have that flexibility to run suitable events when the opportunity comes along without too much of a worry that it's correctly licensed, because everything is already in place. And I don't know whether see, I'm sure people know, so if you don't, sorry, it's a bit boring, but with a temporary events notice, we are limited on capacity up to 499 people, and that is obviously time limited as well, up to 7 days. These premise licenses in place have been great for sort of not last minute as such, because they still have to have all the regulatory paperwork in place. But for Jubilee events where people wanted to have civic ceremonies, we were able to help with that because the licenses were already in place. So that was great. So also I just wanted to stress that all events on this area would be run either by the Vale of Glamorgan Council or a company that was in partnership of the Vale of Glamorgan Council. And all outside companies who work with us would have to sign a hire agreement and take over any sort of regulation for the site. All our events just don't go unregulated, as I mentioned. We have a council's event safety advisory group, which is called ESAG. Sorry, there's a lot of jargon here now, isn't there? And this is a group that is made up of council departments that are relevant for events, such as highways, health and safety, licensing. I think so. Who else comes on to that? Regulatory services, but police, ambulance and fire also attend that meetings. They happen every month, but also people provide information, all their events documents, risk assessment, events plans, insurance to that group. And then part of my role as well is that I distribute all this. So if anyone's got any comments or wants to make as issues with events, that's when the group can help to make sure safe events take place within the Vale. Our emergency planning department chair those meetings also. So for our council events, ones that we organise, all our paperwork as well goes to that group as well, which the police sit on. Just to give you a bit of a background for this application, we trialled a Halloween festival last October within the medieval village. It was with Production 78, who are a local based events company within Penarth. It was a really successful, lovely family event. It was ticketed, sessions over mainly the half-term holidays, and it ran for 10 days from the start to the end of half-term. It had a small concession area with food, pumpkin carving, a little fairground and a bar, and then you walked into the main area of the field at the village, which included, like, you know, scarecrows, little scary stories. I think there was a witch in one of the houses, but it worked really well and was really successful, and then there were no problems with that. Obviously, this events had to run on a temporary events notice, which I mentioned before, and as this is limited to 7 days and the event itself ran for 10 days, it meant that halfway through the event had to shut for a day. So if this event then could run now on a premise license, it would mean that the whole festival would run continuously without any breaks, making a much better offer in terms of the whole area. Again, Production 78, as part of this, worked really closely with the council. They put all their paperwork, event documents into our Event Safety Advisory Group, which is ESAG. And again, the police can comment there if they have any issues with those documents. Production 78 ran the event very well with a big security team from a national company called Rubicon. There was overnight security, first aid areas, child protection policies in place, and we had no problems with that event as such. The fields at the medieval village is also used for some outdoor cinema to run, and I think this potentially could come under that license as well. So that's really our...
Sorry, can I possibly comment about the outdoor cinema?
Yeah.
Are you aware of the large number of noise complaints last summer against it?
Yeah. Could we perhaps just let Sarah finish, then I'll invite comments as we proceed through the meeting. Could we just follow the format of the meeting? Sarah, have you finished your presentation? Then
I've
No.
just got two more things. Is that okay?
Yeah, carry on, please. Carry on.
Okay, thanks. Oh, it's
We
just
have
really
questions afterwards.
Yeah, of course. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So that was just an overview, really, of our sort of experience and the background for the application. So moving on, just looking at the conditions, if that was okay, that were presented by the police. We have spoken with Scott outside of the meeting. We have agreed to a number of conditions, which is great, but there were just two that we potentially may have an issue with. The first one is the supply of CCTV. As he mentioned, we run a number of events with bars already. The bars tend to be small scale, street food type bars. And we've managed these quite successfully at the moment and safely without CCTV. The measures we routinely put in place as a matter of course for bars are SIA, security staff have to be present during the opening hours of the bar. The areas are fenced off for drinking within that area. They can't move alcohol out. For example, at Barry Island, they're kept within an area. People can't just go wandering off on the prom. We have challenge 25, and generally the hours are not late, 7 or sort of 9 o'clock within that area. I understand there is some CCTV already on site, which would show the entrance in specifically to the Halloween festival area, and we'd be happy to use that for those events. And also, as I mentioned before, sorry, it's another jargony thing again, the ESAG, where it's the Event Safety Advisory Group of the council, the police actually sit on that. So if in the future events actually went to ESAG and they felt that they had particular issue with a part of the event, or it needed CCTV, or they would want it to consider as something different, I think that in that area then they could chat to us and we would be happy to take those comments on board. So there is a control measure in place, I feel, already for that condition. And also, sorry, the second one, if I could just mention as well on my last one, is the supply of a personal licence holder having always to be on site. Just to say, in most cases, the council, if it's a council event or partnership, the personal licence holder would be on site, which wouldn't be a problem, so we could cover that. And as part of their event plans, we would have to have like a management team, responsible staff on site always to cover the event anyway. But if it was a condition, I feel it would be quite restrictive, only for the fact that if the person's licence holder has to go away from site or is called away, if they have a family emergency or someone's taken ill, that event then couldn't go ahead. So it would stop that event from going ahead. For example, with the Barry Island Food Festival recently, we organised it as a council event. I had COVID 2 days before, so obviously I wasn't able to go onto site, and we were able to have someone responsible, management, take over from that event, and it worked well, and there wasn't that restriction in place. So I think that's really everything I've covered, Chair, if that was okay, and thank you for looking at our application. That's okay.
Thank you, Sarah. Well, I think if Jane wants to, Councillor Norman, I should say, Councillor Jane Norman wants to ask a question, and then maybe Councillor Pamela Drake, and I want to ask a question after that. So, Jane, please fire away.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. Could you clarify, please, your reason for not wanting the extra CCTV? I mean, it's such a small request, really, which could make life a lot easier for your application. I'm just wondering what your problem is with this application for extra CCTV. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I take on board your comments. As I mentioned, we feel we managed it quite successfully without it. Plus, having to bring it in is quite a complicated procedure. We wouldn't want to just bring in a cheap, CCTV coverage. And I've looked at some quotes at security companies recently. We'd look to bring in some, if it was if we were looking, if we had to do it, we'd have to hire an actual temporary device, which is about £500 or £600. And then there is the issue of how it's recorded, if it's good enough quality, who keeps that data, who reads it. So it's quite a complicated process that I feel would be quite restrictive as a condition on the licence as is. If the police felt, like I mentioned before, if the police felt there was a certain event that would need it, that would go to our event safety advisory group already, and I would be happy to take that comment there and to see if we could provide it specifically for that event. So there is already that control measure there. I just think to be as a condition might be quite restrictive for events going forward. That's how
I've been given to understand that the Vale already have a mobile CCTV unit that they're able to use around different areas. Would it be worth looking into that?
Yeah, I could look into that for sure. Is that within the security department of our council, is it, or?
I'm not sure. Perhaps Richard can answer that.
Yeah.
I've had experience of it whereby we've had incidents of fly tipping, and so cameras are placed up in relation to areas where that occurs. So that's how I know that we have the ability to record. So it may be connected to waste, and they may be the department to have the further discussion with.
They also use it for illegal parking, etc. Right. Okay. I mean, I would be happy to look at that, and then that would. Do you think that would be? They would be happy for that to be in place for 10 days.
That's the question you'll have to ask.
Yes. We can't answer that question, unfortunately.
No, sorry. Yes, sorry. I wasn't asking that. Yes,
thank you. It's a bit out of our control, isn't it?
Definitely. Thank you.
Yeah, but we could push for it. You know, we could get behind it.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for that.
Nothing for so hang on. So one question, Sarah. I'm just looking at the end of the report and the representations that are made by those people who object to the application, and the general thrust of that is people are concerned about the risk of noise. Do you foresee the grant of this license causing any greater risk of noise than is already on the site? And how really would we control that if there were noise issues?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Chair. So we didn't have any noise complaints with regard to the Halloween festival, but we would run that and look at noise as always as part of our events. I understand with the cinema there for this summer there was a noise complaint. I understand that was dealt with at the time. We received a call. We spoke to the organisers who moved some of the speakers, changed some of the sounds, the volumes. And I understand that then was remedied and that was fine because I dealt with it personally, and calls came in to us. I spoke to the organiser and then I went back to the residents the next day and they said that they felt it was dealt with and they didn't have any more problems with it. So I think we're quite proactive in ways of doing that. Just to note as well that the cinema went through on that temporary events notice, which it could do again. But the premise licence, we would have more control over it if it did be part of this premise licence if it was to be granted. So that's where we can have much more control over it and help with those noise complaints.
Thank you. Anybody else? No other councillors have? Oh, Pam has questions. Pam, yeah. Councillor Drake has questions.
Yeah, it was to do with health and safety regarding first aid and things like that. And this is a passion of mine. Do we have a defibrillator on site?
I think we do. Now, this is going to make me sound very bad, but that's something I could ask the Rangers and Steve Pickering and Steve Pickering's team. But as I mentioned, people who are organisations that are using the site for events, which obviously would be either us or someone in partnership with us, would have to provide a first aid provider, and as part of that, they would a defib would be part of the kit that they would bring on site. We work really closely with South Wales Ambulance in terms of events, and what we'd never want to do is put more more on them. So depending on obviously numbers, we take advice from South Wales Ambulance as to what that first aiders should provide, and it's often now a vehicle, a number of paramedics, obviously the kit, which would include the defibs, but I'm sure there's one on site already, but I will check. But yeah, we work really hard to make sure the first aid provided it is all relevant and what's needed for the number of people and capacity there.
Yeah, I'm pushing to have these installed everywhere,
Yeah,
so it's vital.
Yeah, great
Even,
idea.
schools and everything, because it's happening all the time, you see.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And obviously, training people to use them, which is brilliant.
Another thing, yeah.
Sorry, I digressed there.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jane, have you got your hand up, or is that a historic?
Yeah, no, it is another request. Sarah, the sale of alcohol, I assume this will only take part during an event, and it won't be something like that's available in the little cafe there or anything else. It'll only be during an event. It won't be 24/7, what have you.
Oh yes, no, totally no. It would only be during events, agreed by us, and during events. Yeah, nothing outside of those.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on that point that Councillor Norman's raised in relation to the little cafe on site, I understand that is already licensed for the purposes of the sale of alcohol in any event. Not that it's relevant to this application, because again, this is a separate application.
Thank you very much, Richard.
And also, nobody will be able to bring alcohol from outside onto the site, I presume.
No, definitely not. And that's where the large stewarding teams, would work to, prevent that from happening. Yeah.
Yes, like they do at Glastonbury, they're very strict on there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, very strict. And obviously this site, which is great, because it's fenced off, allows us to, and whoever's running events there, to really control access and to be really secure in that area.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no further questions from the councillors, it's now Mr. Hill's opportunity to put questions to Ms. Jones. They are to be limited to questions because we will next hear from the police. There'll be an opportunity for questions, and then Mr. Hill will be able to make representations generally. So that's the way we need to progress.
Thank you, Richard.
Hi there.
Right, so we finished with Sarah for now. Don't go far, though.
Mr. Hill, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a few questions. First of all, on your note about defibrillators, I believe there's one situated outside the Ranger's office. I'm sure I've seen it there.
Great, thank you.
You said about the cinema noise, and it was dealt with. The only problem we all had was that you could do absolutely nothing about it at the time. Now, we have families with small children, and they were subject, and for their health and well-being, it was going on, that event particularly, the showing was gone past midnight. Now, that is not good for young children on a hot summer's evening, and that noise could have been heard half a mile away. There was nothing we could do on the night about stopping that noise. Now, what provisions are there to actually address that at the actual time of the event?
Hi, shall I come in there?
I'm happy to assist.
Yeah.
Obviously, environmental health have been contacted in relation to this application, and they're the appropriate authority that should there be any issues in relation to noise, they would have raised them within this forum today. In relation to future events, regulation of noise as to whether or not it amounts to a statutory nuisance would be a function for them.
Yeah, but as I say, I know that we did try to, it was so loud that night. We tried everything to try and find a way to report it and get something done at the time. There was absolutely nothing that we could do that evening. I know it was dealt with the following evening, but we had no recourse for anything. We literally just had to suffer that night with the noise, which was unacceptable.
Mr. Hill, what I would say in relation to that, obviously the council licence a lot of events, and that those can range from music festivals, like you've heard in relation to Glastonbury, and by the very nature of these licensable activities, they will cause a noise. You cannot sometimes operate certain licensable activities without there being a noise. What then happens is you have to consider whether within the law that amounts to a statutory nuisance, because if we were to not license anything that caused a noise, you would never have football matches, you wouldn't have a myriad of entertainment matters. Of course, if this was routinely happening, if it was preventing people for a long duration from sleeping, for example, having a very serious material impact upon their daily lives, then that would tip over into being a statutory nuisance. But unfortunately, in relation to licensing things which by their very nature cause a noise, it's very difficult to approach that.
But this noise was heard over half a mile away. And the problem you've got with the medieval village, it's in a rural stroke semi-rural situation. You don't need a lot of noise for it to travel that distance. And what you're effectively saying then is that we just have to put up with it. Is that right?
No. And what I'm also saying is that reasonable noise within time frames. So if you're having an event which finishes at 10 o'clock in the evening, that's generally accepted from an environmental health point of view as being acceptable because it allows normal sleep patterns. Obviously, there are matters that can be taken into account to mitigate noise, and I think that's what the officer has outlined in terms of how it was approached on the last occasion. But what I'm trying to sort of point out is that the very nature of some licensable activities means that you can never eliminate noise associated with them.
I agree with you, except this was a screening that went past midnight. We've had this past midnight because it was midsummer. The screening didn't start till gone 10 o'clock.
Mr. Hill, I can't comment on that. I don't have any information in relation to the event you're referring
as I say,
to.
Complaints were made and detailed by the complaints, noise complaints thing. So it's out there as what the complaints were. And I think that's the general worry of every resident around here, that we're going to get summer events with our windows open, and it's not just finished at 11 o'clock. We've also had noise. What provision have you got to stop noise where people are leaving the events?
Mr. Hill, again, that's not a licensable activity. As the application is set out, it is applying for these to finish at 11 o'clock. In relation to somebody operating outside any licensable hours, that in itself is a criminal offence, and that can be addressed for breach of licence condition.
But under the licence application, it also comes under public disorder, doesn't it?
So in relation to noise complaints, I'll reiterate, those would be representations by the responsible authority, which would be environmental health. They have not come forward and made any representations in relation to noise, despite obviously them being involved in previous complaints. So we can, of course, take account of what you say in relation to the noise that you experienced at that event, but the evidence before us from professional officers doesn't exist. In relation to, sorry, was it public?
So what my question is, also under a licence application, I understand one of the things that has to be considered is public disorder.
Yes,
which
yes. So public
people...
disorder is a matter that is brought forward by the responsible authorities, and in this case, that would be the police. And we'll shortly move on to hear from the police in relation to those matters. When you have an opportunity to talk to your application, you haven't raised any issues, as far as I can see, in relation to public disorder.
We did. We mentioned about the fact there's noise and what have you when people are leaving the events.
Okay, so that I would interpret that as a noise-related issue. Public disorder effectively relates to crime and disorder.
Okay.
Okay. I hope that assists.
Okay.
Mr. Hill, if you have any more questions now of the officer, this is the point at which you should put those questions. Okay.
I've got one further question, actually. As regards to noise or disturbance, the other concern that a lot of people around here is and have, it's not necessarily on the residents, it's on the local ecosystem. For example, you have nesting bats, you have buzzards, you have blue jays, you have owls. Now, in the past, the applicants of the Vale of Glamorgan have turned down applications due to them saying that this will cause disturbance to the wildlife. And I have a conflict trying to marry up disturbance caused by events late at night when other applications are turned down because they don't want disturbance. And I have to say, as a view, my view is it's a wildlife area. And I don't see that it's necessarily environmentally friendly to keep having events in the middle of a wildlife area.
Can I respond to that? Yeah. Hi, Mr. Hill, it's Sarah. Hiya. Thanks for your question. Obviously, we're just talking itself about the medieval village there, and really, I mean, as this application is, it's for occasional events, you know, as we stressed. So the Halloween festival potentially, and the cinema, and I, you know, take on board your comments there. So that's really 2 events. So we do work really closely with the rangers and the management team, the countryside management team there. And if they thought there was any problems or effect to the wildlife there, you know, the events wouldn't go ahead. So we would always take advice from them for that. And like I said, it's really occasional events. It's not a large amount of events in that area.
But can I just say though, that as regards to occasional events, I think talking to a lot of the local residents, that's the other thing that worries them. You're applying for a permanent license.
Yeah.
Now, once the permanent license is granted, you can hold events anytime you want.
Yeah, sure.
It's all very well saying these are occasional events, but as soon as you grant a license for a permanent, then that means what it says, and you can hold events anywhere. And I think one of the other concerns tied up with that permanent event is knowing that the medieval village now is a wedding venue. Is the intention to allow live music and sales of alcohol extending the wedding venue into a wedding and reception venue?
No, just to reiterate that, I understand, just go back to the beginning of your question, I understand it is confusing and it does look scary. When you look at the application, it's every day, 11 till 11, they're in place. Like you mentioned before, it's just really because it's a big process, it's quite expensive. So we put that in to be as thorough as we can so that if last minute, it's not last minute because that's the wrong word, so that makes it sound unregulated, but it is in place then should relevant suitable events come ahead, it is there for us to use that license. So it does look scary, but in reality, events, like I said, it's 2 or 3 a year. If you look at all our other premise licenses where we run across, even in somewhere like really busy like Barry Allen's, where we have had premise licenses running for, I don't want to say because this makes me sound really old, like 15 years now, then, you know, we've run tops there about 2 or 3, probably 4 events a year. For one, we don't have budget to be holding massive amounts of events. So it's really in place, just an as if. And like I say, if you look at our type of other events we run and the duration, it's not that many a year. It's just in place for that flexibility there and then. And as we mentioned before, nothing would take place there without us, in partnership with us or our approval. I don't get involved in the wedding licenses. I think they're completely different. I think.
I think that's a major concern.
Yeah,
for everybody.
this license wouldn't.
Once you grant that license permanently, there is nothing to stop. And then once you get into wedding receptions being there, then I believe then that is when you've got a lack of control.
So that's our license wouldn't be used for weddings or any type of celebration following the wedding either.
And but how do we know that? Is what I'm asking.
Because it just wouldn't be part of our licenses. That's something we're not part of at all. Our license is specifically for, like I mentioned, the events. And if you look at what the type of stuff we do, durations, then that's not something we would consider. Right.
So just to clarify, if someone, so are you saying that a wedding, to go to the example of the wedding, does that require a separate license then?
Not 100%.
Does that have to be separately licensed, or in theory, is it covered under this license application?
For our license application, I wouldn't consider weddings as part of that. No, I would want it. We're looking at it, like I said, for our specific council events or partnership events. I think a wedding license is completely different. Apologies, I'm not that up to speed on it. But
I think that's the kind of thing that's concerning me. And if you telling me you can't give an, effectively you're saying you can't give an insurance on that, and I think this all adds into the whole thing about the disturbance and everything else that's been mentioned in the objections, is why people are objecting to it.
Mr. Hill, with all due respect, the applicant has made it clear the purpose of the licence. She's also made it clear that this isn't meant for the purposes of weddings. And in relation to your representations, you haven't raised issues with regard to weddings, so it places her in difficulty in answering that question today.
No,
but the application is as set out, and it's quite clear that this isn't going to involve weddings and wedding receptions. What I can also assure you of is, if for some reason, because you raised the point of the fact that events could be carried out technically 11 to 11, 7 days of the week. You're part and parcel of this process, and if the license were to be granted, and what actually materialised was very different to the application that's been presented today, which is also being recorded, you would be able to review that license.
Right.
So I hope that gives you some.
Right. So there is once, not knowing how licenses work in that respect. So once the license is granted, I presume there is a way of reviewing that license and appealing that license, is there? If there are problems.
There is, and that is the mechanism, and that is the nature of the Licensing Act 2003. Essentially, central government has said there should always be a presumption in relation to the grant of a license, because the mechanism is, if it doesn't operate well, or there are problems, if the licensing objectives are infringed, you bring about a review of that license based on the evidence and the problems arising as a result of the grant of that license.
Right, okay. I wasn't aware of that, but I assumed that somewhere along the line it was.
Perhaps then we can move to the South Wales Police to present their representations.
Can I just ask a quick clarification? Sorry, Richard. Sarah, this business about the cinema complaint, is this the only complaint you've had about the cinema?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to say that I felt that we did deal with that. I dealt with it on that weekend, and then hopefully that was resolved.
But that is the only function you've had, event that you've had complaints. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Right, there we are. So do we have any further questions of Sarah at this time? No. So do we have a representative from the police here?
Yes, Chair, you've got Scott McCarthy online for you.
So perhaps, good afternoon, Scott. So could we hear your views on this? We've seen your supplementary information yesterday. We've seen the dialogue on the CCTV, but if you could bring us up to date on the police's view of this. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Those who haven't met me, my name's Scott McCarthy. I've been in process of licensing now for just over 2.5 years, so my responsibility is for premises within the Vale of Glamorgan. Part of that role is to act as the representative of South Wales Police as a responsible authority when applications are submitted. I review the application, see what has been requested, the times of which the applicant wishes to operate, and see what measures they're putting forward to promote the 4 licensing objectives. It's very rare that an application is submitted that I have no say on. So what we do then, over a 28-day period called the consultation period, is we work with the applicant to discuss how they see the license being operated in the future and come together to formulate a number of conditions that are appropriate and proportionate. We don't use a one-shoe-fits-all approach. Every application is taken on its own merits. When this application for Cosmiston was received, I'll run you through it now if you have it to hand. You can see on page 5, there's a basic overview, which Sarah's already mentioned this morning, how they see the license operating, naming Halloween Christmas festivals, been successfully trialled previously, and family ticketed audience events. We have no issue with those, providing they are managed appropriately. The timings offered, again, already mentioned before me today, 11 until 11, giving that scope for an event to be held anytime in that window, and that's across a 7-day period. I won't go on about matters that have already been discussed. Sarah's already set out the number of events they're looking to do per year, so I won't labour that point with you this afternoon. If we can move along to, it's page 17, section M. It is where the applicant is to set out points they wish to put forward to promote licensing objectives, as I previously mentioned. And what we can see in the box entitled General are references to other legislation, be it environmental health, fire safety, health and safety, mentioning that the ESAG, the Events Safety Advisory Group, events will be brought up there so we can all have a meeting on, which I will come back to later. However, looking at there are very few points which I would like to see on a new license that would promote those licensing objectives. And for anyone who isn't sure, those licensing objectives are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, public nuisance, and the protection of children from harm. As the application was received, the position of the police was one of objection, not outright objection. We are not saying that we don't want the license at all, but in its current form, we objected. So I worked with Sarah and came together with a number of conditions, 8 in total. Now, I was aware that we've come to loggerheads, if you will, over the provision of CCTV. I was not aware there was an issue over a DPS or personal license holder being present. And that is condition number 4 on the police representations, which you'll have in your bundle, which is item 4. That is something we can address. For me, and for the police, having a personal license holder on site is key. It is that point of contact. If someone has sat a qualification to obtain that license, and they will be there to uphold the licensing objectives. Now, I understand the point that was made earlier. If someone has to rush off in an emergency, that can be dealt with as an as-when basis. What we can't have is events being set up and run without suitable management being in place. And that's what the license holder or the DPS would do. I believe Sarah was planning on being the DPS or designated premises supervisor on this license. And that is our point of contact then, the person on the license, if there are issues to discuss. The CCTV condition, it's not something that we just plucked from thin air. We are seen as the experts on crime and disorder. And as mentioned previously, one of the license objectives is the prevention of crime and disorder. CCTV is widespread in the country now. I think we're all familiar. You can get it in your local shop, in your doctors, on the buses, in your taxis, even in your car if you so wished. Not only is it a good source for the police to investigate and apprehend persons that get involved in committing offences, it is shown and it is proven that having it present can act as a deterrent to someone doing something they really shouldn't. Bear with me. The CCTV condition I have proposed is actually bespoke to this licence. When I initially spoke to Sarah, I was asking that cameras would cover the entire area. You can see on the maps provided how large that is. But as I've used previously, making it appropriate and proportionate to the application, I've looked to trim down the area that needs to be covered. And I was just looking for the areas where the public would have access during an event. Okay. I was made aware that there is CCTV already on one of the historical buildings. Sarah did send across an image with the locations of that. If that were to be used, we would need to make sure it was fit for purpose and it was fully covering the entrance and not just the backs of people's heads as they walk close to the proximity of the building. Item number 5, I believe, in the bundle from the police is a guidance document that the Association of Chief Police Officers and the Home Office compiled, and that's the standard we work to. And in the opening paragraph at the top, it actually uses the phrase, they must be fit for purpose and easily accessible. So that's what we would look for there. If the license is granted, then his CCTV is fit for purpose. I stay on the subject of CCTV. Back in May 2017, there was the horrendous incident at the Manchester Arena where 22 people were killed. Off the back of that, there's new legislation on its way. It's known as Martin's Law. It's the Protect Duty. It's heavily linked with counter-terrorism and puts an onus on not only operators of licensed premises, but also local authorities to cover large open spaces such as parks, fields, beaches, event spaces and such, with a view to mitigating any possible terror risks. You may think I'm crazy talking about terror offences now on this licensing hearing, but any area where the public can gather en masse could be a potential target for a lone individual with idealistic views on the world. I'll come back round to a point that Sarah made earlier on. We've asked for CCTV. Sarah suggested that if there are specific events going forward, we could raise a point at the Event Safety Advisory Group, the ESAG. My issue with that would be there's no bite in that. I can't impose anything. I can't insist on anything. I can ask the question. I can ask, can we have CCTV for this particular music event that may be happening? But that's it. It'll be down to other persons present to decide whether or not it's doable. And if it comes down to cost, it's most likely my suggestion will be turned down. And it's worth noting that the Licensing Act 2003 makes no mention of cost prohibitions when setting up a license. It's all to do, from my perspective, the prevention of crime and disorder. So as a very, very brief summary of what I've said so far, South Wales Police don't object to the granting of the licence as a whole, but we would like to see the CCTV condition and the DPS/personal licence holder present for an event condition included on the licence. I'll take any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you very much, Scott. That was a good all-encompassing report, and I think we've learned about the police approach helpfully. So does anybody present have questions for Scott? I can ask our members of our subcommittee first. Sarah, any questions? No?
No, I think that covered everything, especially about the terrorism thing. That's always a worry, always in the back of your mind, isn't it?
No, well, thank you very much, Scott. So I think that probably concludes.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Yeah, just one little question on the subject of CCTV. Would the intention be to cover the car park on people leaving the event as well?
From the policing perspective, no, that wouldn't. We would just look to have CCTV in the licensable areas as a minimum at the point of entry and exit, and on the bar or bars where alcohol is being sold, not covering a car park. Okay.
I just wondered if anything happened after as people leaving, would that be covered on any film as well?
No, that's a good suggestion. If something were to happen in the car park, then colleagues in uniform, apologies, my camera is off, I do apologise. My colleagues in uniform would investigate that as a report of crime or disorder accordingly.
Right.
Right. Any other questions for Scott? No. So I think following the normal course of events, we should now hear from those who wish to speak to raise their objections to this application. So who do we hear from?
It's simply to move to Mr. Hill now for him to expand upon the existing representations that are contained within the papers.
Yeah, I think I've already through questions given the objections we had, and I think that has been based on experience. And I know we were on about the cinema this year. I think the problem is we had problems the previous year, but I don't think anyone really knew how to complain. And I do agree with, is it Sarah, who said it was dealt with the following night. It was dealt with very well. And I had emails actually from the company, and we didn't have any problems the following night. I'd say I see a lot of people out and about. I walk my dogs. I live right opposite. I walk my dogs all over the park, and I know quite a lot of people as I walk around. And they all live locally, and they have had issues that I don't know whether they've made separate representations, but I think the whole thing that the concerns are noise, and if you have a live music event, that's going to be probably harder to manage the noise than other events. And I also think that there has been some disturbance when people have left these events. Just to make a comment on the Halloween one, I think actually that seemed to be very well run last year, and I don't think anyone's got any objection to that kind of event at all. I think that the objections being raised are ones involving later night and particularly alcohol. I think most of the objections we covered in my questions anyway.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hill, and thank you for bringing to the committee's attention the local concerns about the application, because it is our duty and responsibility to consider everything that is said for and against this application. So if there's nothing else to be said, I assume the committee can now retire to consider this. Amy can tell us what to do.
If it's okay with yourself, Chair, as per the procedure, we would obviously give an opportunity to people that have presented to sum up if there's any further points. And then there would be any points of clarification from the committee members, and then we would retire.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've heard pretty comprehensively from Sarah. There's just, you don't really need, if you want to sum up, please feel free. Councillor Norman has her hand up, so perhaps she's going to ask something.
Just another quick one. Sorry, Sarah. You're saying about excuse me, about responsible adult being on site, etc., and how inconvenient. Now, in the application, there is an area where you can apply for joint signature applications. So more than one person can apply for this role. So surely if you have two named people to carry out this role, surely somebody could be available at some time.
Thanks, Councillor. Is that in regard to the personal licence holder, or?
Yeah.
So I think at the moment, I think that obviously is me, and then anyone that took over or was in partnership, as I've mentioned, and was a personal licence holder, yes, they could be on site for sure. That's great and no problem.
Yvonne has raised her hand. I think she can clarify the position in relation to personal licence holders. So
thank you.
Perhaps.
Thank you. There can only be one designated premises supervisor named on a licence, but obviously the licence holder has the option of having other personal licence holders on site, and I think that is the condition that the South Wales Police have requested.
No, that's why I asked the question. Yeah.
That would be for the applicant to clarify that point.
Thanks, Yvonne. Do I say? Oh, sorry. Do I go? No. Shall I go?
Yes, Sarah, you can go in now if you want to add.
Oh, apologies. So it's just really to reiterate that point, which is in most circumstances, personal licence holder would be myself and on site if it was a council event, and a personal licence holder then obviously for a partnership event. It's just in that case of if it was a condition, it would be quite restrictive if anything was to happen then, as I mentioned before, last minute, because I think if they weren't on site, the event couldn't go ahead if something was to happen short notice. So it's where the majority of the time that wouldn't be a problem. It's just if it was a condition, it would be restrictive if something did happen short notice. Thank you.
Scott, did you want to come in?
Yes, it was just to clarify off the back of what Yvonne was saying. Thank you, Chair. The way the condition is worded, I have had this experience in the past where, for reasons beyond their control, a DPS was unable to be somewhere. That's why it specifies DPS or a personal licence holder. And the condition ends with when the sale of alcohol takes place. So if there was an event to take place there where there wasn't the sale of alcohol, maybe like a family fun day with teas, coffees, soft drinks, burgers and something, then a licence holder or the DPS would not need to be present. It's only when the sale of alcohol is taking place. So that wouldn't put onus on Sarah to be there for every event every time.
Chair, if I could just interject on that point, given that Sarah is the DPS and the only personal licence holder, we would have to consider a condition which requires an additional personal licence holder on that basis, and that we can't do that based on the current application that is before us. So it will be either to decide whether or not that is a condition of the licence or not a condition of the licence. But we can't grant it on the basis of a further licence being applied for.
Thank you, Richard. Scott, you got your hand up again? No,
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah,
Just coming off the back of what Richard was saying there. When it specifies a personal licence holder, it doesn't need to be a named individual. If you've got external suppliers coming in to provide the alcohol, providing there is a personal licence holder there with that service, that would fulfil the requirements to be with the condition. And if the council did wish, if the council did wish to have 2 or 3 members of their event staff with personal licences, then that's a training matter they can take forward in the future.
Right, thank you. So any other points of clarification or summing up from anybody, so that everybody can have their full say? So we've probably reached the time when we will...
Scott, is that a legacy hand?
Apologies, yes. Just wait, I'll do a quick summary if that's in order to do so.
Yeah.
Just to reiterate what was said earlier then, the position of South Wales Police is not a total objection to this licence, but we would like to see the conditions put on that licence. The CCTV is, in our view, imperative to the prevention of crime and disorder, as well as the apprehension and detection of crime after the event. I would ask members of the committee to give serious consideration to our request for CCTV, and to refer in doing so to the item I provided, item number 6, surrounding Martin's Law, the Protect duty. And I've highlighted a number of points in there which these recommendations will be coming forward. That's looking to be into law summer 2023. It's in the pack I've given you there, and it does state that the onus is on to the local authorities to make these mitigating measures and put them in place. And it does state CCTV as one of these measures. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And any other summing up or points before we retire?
I have none.
No, right. So perhaps our little committee can retire to consider this matter, if Amy can make the appropriate arrangements for that.
Thank you very much, Chair. So the committee members, Councillor Norman, Morgan and Drake, will now remain on the line with myself and Richard Price as the legal officer. And I kindly ask all other parties to disconnect from the hearing, and the decision of the committee will be provided in writing via the licensing officer, Yvonne Witchell, at a later state. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Scott.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Paul Hill.
Is now exiting.
Okay, everybody. Everybody who should have exited has. Just to let you know, Democratic Stream is my colleague Liz. I'm just going to stop the recording. And Liz, if you could make sure that could you confirm for us in the chat when the live stream has paused, please? So just bear with us 1 second, Chair.